Okay, so we got a ton of requests to deep dive into this whole Teyana Taylor and Iman Shumpert situation, specifically her recent Instagram Live about their divorce.
Yeah, it's definitely been making the rounds online, lots of speculation and back and forth.
And, our listeners know we like to go straight to the source, get the facts, and cut through all that noise.
Exactly. And in this case, the source is, well, Teyana herself. We're working with a transcript of her Instagram Live titled, Teyana Taylor addresses Iman Shumpert divorce leak, motion filing and drama on Instagram Live 2025.
Catchy title.
From the Zach Simmons YouTube channel. So shout out to Zach.
So our mission today is to understand what Teyana had to say, clarify any misconceptions that might be floating around out there, and try to grasp, why she felt the need to address all of this so publicly.
And I think what makes this deep dive particularly interesting is that it gives us a glimpse into how someone in the public eye tries to control their own narrative when so much is being said about them, especially during a very personal and vulnerable time.
Right, because if we start with the timeline, Teyana is very clear that the divorce was officially finalized back in 2024. So all this drama unfolding now in 2025 is kind of confusing for her.
Yeah, it's a year later. She even says at one point, signed, sealed, delivered, like it's done and dusted.
Exactly. And what makes it even more complicated is that she felt like they were in a good place.
Yeah.
Even using terms like baby daddy and baby mom, which implies a certain level of amicability.
Yeah, and that contrast is really striking because on one hand, you have this legal closure, this official end to the marriage, and on the other hand, you have this continued interaction, this almost casual use of these terms that suggest an ongoing relationship.
So then to have all this negativity resurface, to have these rumors and accusations flying around, it just seems to come out of left field for her.
Right, and it really sets the stage for all the hurt and frustration she expresses later on in the life.
And speaking of frustration, let's talk about those alleged leaks, because Teyana seems pretty convinced that Iman has been intentionally spreading rumors about their divorce.
And she points to a very specific pattern that honestly does sound kind of deliberate every time she has a professional win. An award, a movie release, even a sneaker launch. Suddenly there's a negative story about her divorce circulating online.
And it always seems to be timed perfectly to overshadow her success.
Exactly. And she even says she has proof of these leaks. So it's not just a feeling, she believes she has evidence to back up her claims.
Which makes you wonder, what's the motivation behind that? Why would someone try to sabotage their ex-partner's success, especially when they share children, and presumably want the best for them too?
It's a question that comes up a lot in these kinds of situations. What are the dynamics at play behind the scenes, and how much of it is about, ego or control or even revenge?
And then there's the personal hurt that Teyana expresses over even allegedly not defending her against these rumors. She specifically says, not true. Like she wants him to stand up for her to set the record straight.
And you can really hear the pain in her voice when she talks about the sense of betrayal that he wouldn't have her back, especially after she claims to have defended him so many times in the past.
And that perceived lack of support seems to be a major factor in why she filed that motion, which I think needs some explaining because for a lot of people, the word motion sounds very legal and very dramatic.
Yeah, it conjures up images of courtrooms and lawsuits.
But Teyana takes the time to clarify what emotion actually means in this context.
Right. It's not about, suing someone or trying to get them thrown in jail. It's basically a formal request to the court to address a specific issue within the existing divorce case.
So it could be about things like temporary child custody arrangements or financial support.
Or in this case, it seems to be about addressing safety concerns. Teyana explains that she filed the motion because she didn't feel safe and felt helpless after an alleged argument with Iman over the phone.
And she specifically says, I never tried to get Iman jailed. She repeats that multiple times because she wants to make it clear that this wasn't some kind of vindictive move.
It was a last resort, a way to seek intervention from the court when she felt like she had no other options.
And it all stems from this feeling of being unsafe, which is a really serious issue that goes beyond the typical back and forth of a divorce.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of, feeling protected and supported, especially when you're co-parenting and trying to navigate a difficult situation.
Another big theme that runs through Teyana's live is the issue of privacy. She's very open about her desire to keep things private, to protect herself, Iman, and their children.
And she actually took steps to ensure that initially she explains that she filed for divorce using their initials specifically to avoid public scrutiny, and she managed to keep it under wraps for a whole year.
So it was a very conscious effort on her part to maintain a level of privacy and control over the situation.
Right, and it shows that she wasn't interested in airing their dirty laundry for the whole world to see.
But then, according to Teyana Iman, filed a motion to proceed with their full legal names, which effectively made the divorce public knowledge.
And this is where things get really interesting because she clearly states that she did not initiate that move. It was Iman who made the decision to go public.
So that begs the question, what were his motivations and why, after a year of maintaining privacy, did he choose to bring it all out into the open?
It suggests a shift in strategy or maybe a different approach to handling the public narrative of their separation.
And once it becomes public knowledge, well, the rumor mill starts churning. And one of the biggest rumors that Teyana addresses is this idea that she somehow cleaned up in the divorce, particularly when it came to assets like cars.
Yeah, there were all these reports about her supposedly walking away with a fleet of luxury
Like a
vehicles.
Sprinter
Mhm.
van, a Maybach, a Bronco, a
Like,
Jeep
she
Gladiator.
goes through each one very specifically and says, I bought that, I paid for that. She emphasizes that these were her purchases often made during their marriage or even after the divorce.
But she's dismantling this narrative that she somehow took advantage of the situation or benefited unfairly.
She even points out that they each kept the properties they owned individually before getting married, and that the four properties they acquired together were split evenly two for him.
She also mentions properties that were solely in her name and solely in his name, and she kind of scoffs at those network estimations of celebrity wealth.
Like those figures you see thrown around are often wildly inaccurate.
And it's interesting because she then brings up all these past instances where she actually defended Iman publicly, protected him from negative press or scrutiny.
Like when he allegedly first leaked the divorce when their utilities got shut off, and even during past scandals, she paints a picture of herself as someone who was consistently there for him, always willing to stand up for him.
And that history of support just adds another layer of complexity to the situation because now she's facing all this negativity and she feels like that same level of support isn't being reciprocated.
It's a very human reaction to feel let down, to feel like you've been there for someone and they're not there for you when you need it most.
Yeah. And she even questions, what are the motivations behind these leaks? Why is this happening? Especially now when she's trying to move on and focus on her career.
She suggests that for some people, it's about controlling the narrative, even if it means making someone else look bad. And she points to the timing of these rumors, often coinciding with Iman's new ventures.
Like maybe there's a strategic element to it, a way to deflect attention or generate buzz.
And she's very clear that she has never spoken negatively about him publicly, except to defend him, which again reinforces this idea of her being protective of him and their family.
Now, one of the accusations that really seems to get under her skin is this whole gold digger label.
Yeah, she addresses that head on, and you can hear the anger in her voice. She's furious about that characterization.
She points out that she's been a working professional since she was 15. She's always had her own money and her own success.
And she clarifies that even though she was earning more than Iman after his NBA career, that doesn't make her a gold digger.
She reiterates that she paid for her own things, including replacing her Rolls-Royce after he crashed it, which is a pretty striking example.
It definitely shuts down that whole narrative of her being financially dependent on him.
And speaking of finances, she also clarifies that George reported $1 million payment.
The one that some outlets were calling a seven-figure or eight-figure settlement.
Right. She explains that it wasn't a general divorce settlement. It was one-time payment to cover specific damages, including the Rolls-Royce and other issues.
So it wasn't about her getting a huge payout. It was about resolving specific financial matters related to their separation.
And throughout all of this, you can really sense her desire for peace and privacy. She wants to move on with her life, and she wants Iman to do the same.
She's tired of the drama, tired of the rumors, tired of having her personal life dissected in public.
The fact that these old, untrue rumors keep resurfacing, especially when she's achieving professional success, is clearly frustrating for her.
She even brings up a past instance where Iman didn't attend mediation, which could have been a way to address some of these issues privately.
So it speaks to a breakdown in communication and maybe a missed opportunity to resolve things more amicably. And it's not just about the rumors and the speculation. She also talks about receiving threats online, which adds a whole other layer of seriousness to the situation.
Yeah, it's a reminder that online hate can have real-world consequences.
She says she told Iman about these threats and how unsafe they made her feel. and she was disappointed that his reaction was to argue with her instead of being supportive.
So that fear, that lack of support seems to be a big part of why she filed the motion in the first place.
It's a reminder that behind all the celebrity gossip, there are real people with real emotions and real concerns about their safety and well-being.
And it highlights the importance of, having a supportive partner, someone who has your back, especially when you're facing difficult situations.
But despite all of this drama and the hurt that's clearly there, Teyana also expresses a continued love for Iman and a commitment to co-parenting their children.
Yeah, it's a reminder that relationships are complicated, especially when kids are involved.
She says she'll always love him, that he's family, and that she'll always have his back when it comes to their kids.
But she's also confused by his actions, by the alleged leaks and the lack of public support.
And she even mentions having cordial interactions with him in the past, so it seems like their relationship is still evolving, still figuring out what it looks like post-divorce.
Which is probably the case for a lot of couples who go through a public separation. There's a lot to untangle, both emotionally and logistically.
Now, towards the end of the year, Teyana touches on a broader societal issue, this idea of accountability, particularly among some men.
She contrasts men who she says don't take responsibility for their actions with those who stand up for their loved ones.
And she felt like Iman's silence in the face of all this scrutiny was particularly hurtful, especially given her history of defending him.
It speaks to her expectations of partnership and loyalty within a relationship and how those expectations might not have been met in this case.
And finally, she's very honest about the toll that all this public drama takes on her.
She admits that engaging in this kind of public back and forth gives her anxiety.
Which makes sense because for a lot of public figures, especially those who value their privacy, this kind of exposure can be incredibly draining.
It's a reminder that there's a human cost to all this celebrity gossip.
And ultimately, she ends by pleading for privacy for both herself and Iman.
She reiterates that the divorce is finalized, and she wants them both to be able to move on peacefully.
She even acknowledges Iman's talent and wishes him success separate from their relationship.
So there's a sense of closure there, a desire to put this chapter behind them and focus on the future.
So in this deep dive, we've really gotten a glimpse into Teyana Taylor's perspective on this whole situation. She's addressed the rumors, the speculation, the legal aspects, and the emotional toll it's all taken.
And it's a reminder that behind the headlines and the gossip, there are real people grappling with complex issues.
It makes you think about the challenges of navigating a public divorce, the pressures of maintaining a certain image, and the difficulty of controlling your own narrative when everyone has an opinion.
And it leaves us with some questions to ponder, like how do we balance the public's right to know with an individual's right to privacy? And how do we ensure that everyone involved in these kinds of situations is treated with respect and fairness, even when opinions differ?
Food for thought.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And as always, stay curious.
And stay informed.